Do you find yourself grappling with chronic pain, fatigue, battling illnesses such as Lyme disease, fibromyalgia, CFS, IBS? The list goes on. What if you knew that within each of us lies a remarkable system capable of combating and alleviating these ailments? Today, we're privileged to welcome back a previous guest to help us unveil the secrets of what may be with the most powerful and often overlooked healing system within us all. This is the story of lymphatic drainage with Dr. Perry Nickelston. Dr. Perry, so good to have you back on.
Thank you so much for having me back, my friend. I'll take any opportunity I can to talk about lymphatics and my love for that system.
Hey, I
I'm
really
in.
appreciate that. I know you are a man who truly, gets the lymphatic system, the importance of it. In our last conversation, I feel like we were just touching on it, and
Yeah.
maybe we could start where we left off because you made a very good case for the lymphatic system being one of the most powerful and often most overlooked systems for healing. Can you go back and just maybe recap what brought you to that realization that the lymphatic system is so crucial in healing?
Well, I'd be happy to. Thank you very much for being able to share that message. Honestly, it was what saved my life.
Mm,
It's not a sugarcoat for sure. I mean, I was really lost in what I call the quicksand or the abyss of illness, where no matter what I was trying to do to help myself, I just was sinking fast, kind of like quicksand, honestly.
yeah.
Like the more you try, the harder you try, the more things you do, the faster you sink. So it's a perfect analogy. And I realized first thing you do in quicksand is they say, breathe, which is a
Hmm.
good thing to do, relax, calm yourself, look at your surroundings, and begin to think differently.
Hmm.
So that's what you have to do. And it's a perfect analogy for the body in healing. You have to calm yourself and relax, and typically have to have a different thinking process to change how you're feeling, because that's what it's telling you. Like whatever you're doing is not working well. I need you to shift something. And the first thing you do is how you think. So I stopped and I began to think differently. And the branch I grabbed to prevent myself from going under was the lymphatic system. And when I began to implement the working on the lymphatics and then changing it up a little bit based on everything that I've learned over my 30 years prior of knowing about the body and the different systems, I began to pull myself out. And within, honestly, a matter of days, I felt a significant shift and how much better I felt, and my energy came back, and then my outlook for the possibility of healing came back. And then I think it's going on like 10 years later now, and I'm trying to be that branch for other people. And that's why I love shows like this, because it's the simple fact of the awareness of that system that can change your life, because you don't know what you don't know. And you can't control something until you have some awareness about what you can control. And does that make sense? So when you know about the lymphatics and you begin to work on it, you're going to say the same thing. Wow, this stuff is crazy. It really works. And I feel different and I feel better. That's going to happen.
Yeah. And it's wild, Perry, because so few have that awareness of even what the lymphatic system is. And I'm talking about
Right.
even doctors out there. I was at an
Right.
event, I was telling you about this before we got on, I lost my voice at, but we were presenting, we had my father's European biological doctor. He started off in Europe coming from Poland, and we had Dr. Rao there from Switzerland. And they were focused on this. Hey, you got to detox and drain and drainage too. It's not just detox, it's drainage, it's
Yeah.
lymphatics, it's moving, getting that out, restoring inner milieu, right? The
Yep.
terrain. And
Mm.
even a few doctors there that were more conventional trained, came after me afterwards and were like, we did not know that. Like, this is brand new to me. This is
Mhm.
lymphatic system is something we don't talk about really. We don't bring up. I mean, toxicity in general isn't something you bring up that much in conventional medicine. Why is it
Mm.
that so much of medicine, healthcare, and what we think health and wellness is is overlooking this system because we do focus sometimes on liver, right? We drink too much.
Yeah.
We say, oh, take the milk thistle, detox the liver. It's like, well, that's just one organ. It's important, but we
Mhm.
never look at the lymphatic.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's pretty much my mission in life and why I'm doing what I do. But honestly, I really can't blame them because that was me
Yeah.
at one point. I mean, it's 10 years I've been doing it. So let's say 20 years of being in healthcare. It never crossed my radar. I learned about it just briefly in chiropractic school. And the same thing for whatever professional degree you went through. You probably covered a small 20-minute, 30-minute session. Be lucky if you get an hour in it of what the lymphatic system is. And even when they teach it to you, they don't put a lot of importance on it,
Right.
which you say, well, I mean, it's probably not important then because I'm not spending a lot of hours on it, right? That just makes sense. But even when they talk about it, they put it in this small box of relevance. So what do I mean by that is that you'll look at the lymphatic system when you have a diagnosed condition, most often called, lymphedema.
Hmm.
And it's a condition where the lymphatic system valves can become not function as optimal or injured. And then edema on the part of that lymph part is stuff gets very puffy and gets swollen, sometimes grotesquely so, because the fluid can't drain. And then they say, well, you have, lymphedema, but then they usually will only look at the body part that's swollen as the part of the lymph system that's dysfunctional. And they often disregard the other 99.999% of the body that also has to use lymphatics, or it'll come across your radar when we hear the big C word, cancer.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because many people have had, lymph nodes removed or they have cancer throughout the lymphatic system. And the reason it is because the lymph system is a huge part of your immune system, and its job is to try to kill cancer cells all day long so you don't get it,
Hmm.
right? Tries to kill them. So then if people don't have those conditions, well, then they say, well, I don't need to look at lymph. And that's what I did. And it was only after I realized that, wow, you touched on it before. It's the system of keeping your body clean, what could you call the milieu, which is a fluid filled environment around the cells. And it's a major player in your immune system and a major player in your vascular system, which is your blood flow system, and controlling inflammation in the body. Those are probably the three most important things you could check off. That's if you don't have those, then you just can't heal. So now I automatically default to you have some type of lymphatic system issue. You just don't know it yet.
Yep.
And it just depends on to what extent that it's there. And they're starting to catch on now because of people are beginning to feel better when they do lymphatics. So that puts you on the radar and they're like, okay, what's going on over here? Everybody's telling me how much better they're feeling. Let's take another look. And so they're doing some research and saying, I think these people might be onto something. And I know they are because it's just based on how physiology works. Once you understand that, you kind of kick yourself up. I should have been here the whole time looking at this system. And another reason it's really coming on the radar is I'm seeing a big connection between a poorly functioning lymphatic system and brain health.
Mm.
And because of the exponential increase in brain related issues called neuroinflammation from Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all these things, they're just got to say, what's going on here, man? We must be missing something. And that's a big piece of it. That's a big piece of it. So they're coming around. And when they see shows like yours and then the general population that is beginning to say, you know what, I'm going to have to learn to take care of myself because medicine just is not doing it for me anymore. They tried, if you're lucky, and it's not working. Then that's when you start to look in all these different places that you never even thought to look out of one thing, necessity.
Right.
You had to save yourself, or very often it's the people that are trying to save a loved one in their life, and they'll find it. That happens a lot.
Yeah. And it seems like there's this perfect storm brewing because, one of the things you mentioned that we have more toxins entering the body than ever before. We're
Yes.
having a hard time getting it out of the body. But then you're going to also talk about such a sedentary life, we're not moving as much. We're
Mm-hmm.
we're we're not active, we're not outdoors, we're not breathing as well. So that starts to build stagnation. And so those toxins have nowhere to go, but the connective tissue in your milieu create cellular havoc, and regeneration, all these things, and then chronic disease comes about. What percentage would you say are lymphatically unhealthy? Because I've had Dr. Casey Means on recently and focusing on the metabolic, and she put that number at 93% were metabolically unhealthy in our
Yeah.
society. Do you see the same with the lymphatic? Would you, if you had to put a ballpark number on it, is it the majority? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I'm going to say 99.9999999
Wow.
percent
That's a lot.
No, let's think about that logically of why. Because the guy, come on, doc, you'd be a little melodramatic. No, that's just how the body works. Okay. First of all, nothing gets anywhere in the body without being in a fluid.
Hmm.
Just catch that. And then what are the primary fluids that you have in your body? Well, you got blood, right? And then that's the big route for all the nutrient stuff. And let's go back to that metabolic one. Like everything's a metabolic process. It's an energetic process, but nothing is going to be metabolic if you don't have a transport system of stuff to be metabolized. Does that make sense? Like
Absolutely.
oxygen or nutrients or amino acids. Once stuff goes in your mouth hole, it's got to go in through the digestive system and then it goes through the blood, right? So the blood is going to take that to its end target where metabolism happens. Krebs cycle, ATP, everybody's going after mitochondria. I'm like, that's great. But when you make all that metabolic energy, you always make waste every single time. That's what happens. I call it cell poop. Metabolism is cell poop. That's it. And then when the cell poops, that's going to be metabolic waste, and that's got to get out. And then my next question is, how do you think it gets out? The next answer would be fluid. And then I'm going to say, which one? And this is when you say lymph. Okay. Because the lymph cleans the fluid that the cells live in. That's what they live in. Okay. That's the milieu, if you will. And also veins remove it. Okay. And that's part of your cardiovascular system, your vascular system. Those are two primary ways out. And then once that goes out, it's going to go back into the circulatory system again. And then it has to go out of the body through your elimination organs, or because every organ you have is pretty much a detox organ. And some people don't like the word detox. So I just call it a waste management organ. That's
Hmm.
what it is. So you're going to pee it out. You're going to poop it out. You're going to sweat it out, and you're going to breathe it out. Those are the biggest ways. And then now I go back to my same question. How does it get to those organs? Then you got to tell me the same thing. The fluid route system through the blood flow, right? So if you get a compromise in the route systems of fluid where stuff can't get out, it stays inside of you. That's not going to work out well for you, because stuff is going to increase inflammation in the body because you're stuck full of stuff that's not supposed to be stuck in there. And your body just does its natural healing thing of, okay, we got to kill it. And it kills it through symptoms: fever, tiredness, fatigue, lethargy, mucus, sneezing, colds, you name it. All those things, I don't even call them sickness symptoms. They're healing symptoms. They're there to prevent you from, first of all, dying, because it's really hard to heal when you're dead. And so these fluid systems need to move. So what I'm going to contend is that people just don't know that these fluid route systems have been not functioning as well as they can, stagnated or blocked, usually for decades. But it wasn't to a point where it was so blocked that you knew it yet. So for me, when you get pain or when you get chronic inflammation or an autoimmune disease, already know you're stuck full of muck. Otherwise, you wouldn't be where you are. Okay. So now you're supposed to get sick and you're supposed to not feel that great. You get injuries, you get trauma, but the operative word is you're supposed to heal from that. And then I always ask myself, well, why in the world are people not healing? Why are they stuck? Why is it chronic? Then I'm thinking, there's got to be something right in front of me that's so simple. I just know it. And that's why nobody is seeing it, because they're overcomplicating the hell out of it because everybody's still suffering. So it's got to be something really elusive that nobody's seen yet. Maybe. But I know that you're never going to get to complicate it if you don't know basics first.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing in the world is more basic than stuff has to get to a cell so we can use the nutrients and make new, stronger ones, more resilient ones, and then get rid of the waste when it uses it, period. Like that has to come first. Now, one of the things that I think will put lymphatics on the radar is that don't just think about the lymph as lymph. It's a system that's not isolated over here in, middle of nowhere. It works with all the other systems of the body, and it always has. That's the thing you need to know. And it is an intricate player with your vascular system. So if you tagged lymphatic health with cardiovascular health, it'd be up here, because everybody goes after one of the top causes of death in the United States, at least, is cardiovascular disease, heart disease. You cannot talk about heart health without talking about lymph health. It's impossible because the two systems are interconnected. And I know I've been talking for a while, but I want to take a moment because I brought this up before we started. I want to read you something,
Please,
from the preeminent #1 textbook on medical physiology that I know anybody who's a healthcare professional, you've probably read this book. The problem is everybody forgot they read the book. All right. And I'm going to take it back and just listen to it and think about what I've been talking about. So this is from Guyton and Hall's Textbook of Medical Physiology, which is one of my all-time favorite books. I mean, it's a thick sucker. It's big. All right, we're going to talk about circulation. Okay. The function of the circulation is to serve the needs of the body tissues. So already it's got to be kind of a big deal. To transport nutrients to tissues. That's how it gets there. Yep. Right? Just because it goes into your mouth doesn't mean it's getting to the tissue. That's a big thing to understand. To transport waste products away. Transport hormones. So hormones got to get to places too. Everybody's got a hormone problem. And the lymph also carries hormones and has a lot to do with hormone balance. From one part of the body to another. I want you to let that sink in for a second. One part of the body. That means that all the parts talk to each other. So if you have an issue with blood flow or lymph flow in one part of the body, it affects the whole organism. And they can feel symptoms anywhere else from one spot having a problem. That's why you never, ever isolate. First of all, it's not possible. And in general, to maintain an appropriate environment, that's the milieu, the cellular environment, in all the tissues for this thing, I added this thing, survival. And optimal function of the cells. Just let that one paragraph sink in. Okay? And I skipped over that when I first started reading the book, but I slowed down and I went through, because you'll miss a lot of the cake when you do that. And I read it. I'm like, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. That's the basic. There's nothing more basic than that, my friend. And it
Yeah.
cycles back to something that we have talked about on the prior episode that they talked about in classical osteopathy since the late 1800s. It's like the Ark of the Covenant and, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just buried somewhere, but it's there. And it was this from Andrew Taylor Still, who said, drainage precedes supply. Drainage precedes supply. What's supply? I already told you what that is. That's the blood flow part.
Yep.
That's the nutrient part. That's the oxygen part. That's your breathing part. And to me, that's the easy part, brother. Those are easy. Okay. What's the drainage part? Oh, that's the waste part.
Yeah.
That's also part of the blood flow that goes out, but that's the lymph part. And that's the detox part of all the organs. And what's precedes mean? Order matters is what that means. Okay. You can put all the stuff you want into here and into the body that's good. And this is the take home, and I'm going to be quiet. No matter what you put in the body, whether you think it's good or bad, which is arbitrary because it changes based on the person's body that you're dealing with, because sometimes kale can be bad for somebody. It all, hang on for it, they all become metabolic waste in the end.
Yes.
So no matter what the supply is, all becomes waste. And the body will not let you put anything in that it cannot get out. That's just the laws of physics too. It's the capacity to be able to let something in when there's already too much stuff in there. Right?
Yeah.
That's a really big thing for people to understand. And that's why I got the answer to why they struggle, because everybody's dumping in supply.
Yes.
And even when they did detox work, like you said, they did some supplements, they tried to do a liver detox, but they never, ever directly went after the lymphatic system itself to clear that stagnation. And I'm going to tell you right now, when it's stagnated, the only way you're going to unstagnate it is to get in there and move it manually and physically by hand, period. That's it. Like, it's going to move when you move. So when you move your body, all fluids are trying to move. But sometimes they're so stuck that you can move yourself 24 hours and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And the other way is through breathing. So if you can optimize your breathing, because if you think about it, breathing is movement, right? You take 22 to 30,000 breaths a day. That's a big pump. But sometimes that's not enough either, because you're too stuck. And the only way you're going to unstuck it is to get in there and get your hands in there and move it.
The supply to waste, analogy there is really a one that's so important, because we focus on the supply holes. We focus on what we put in it. That's just known. It's everything of what we eat. Let's talk about air. Let's talk about breathing techniques. That's the sexy part of it. That's the part where you get to look at it, pick it out, say, I eat this way, take pictures of it, show all these things, but we never focus on the waste. It's the unsexy part. No one wants to talk about the garbage men, but New York City, when there was a garbage strike, people started to notice. The rats came out in full effect, smelled a lot. You couldn't walk around too much, and people started to say, pay those damn garbage men, because we got to get this waste out of here. It's starting to build up, and I can't live like this. And so,
yeah, well, that's the thing, and too, is that what I want people to understand is that that's a question I started to ask myself too, of like, why, if we're doing all the good nutrition, people are doing really good nutrition and they're taking a lot of supplements, and sometimes too many supplements.
yeah,
But and what they should be getting better. Like, why are they not? Then you have to stop struggling in the quicksand, right? And then that's when I realized that all those things are going into a system that's too stuck. Because a lot of people take supplements to try to detox, right?
Mm-hmm.
which is good because you need those things because you don't get it enough from the food supply in the world we live in right now. It's virtually impossible. So you need the help, but you're back to what I mentioned before is that you need the garbage men to come out and pick up the stuff that's already at your curb
Yes,
before you start adding the stuff in because there's no supplements to take away that garbage. But
that's
that's
right.
you got to pick it up, put it in the truck, get it out. That's it. And then when you do that, all the nutrition and all the supplements work even better or
Yep.
the way that they're supposed to. Because I got really frustrated, man, because I love functional medicine. And um, I've gone to a lot of functional medicine people. I have many people who've gone to multiple ones, but unfortunately, that world can be just as toxic, and I chose that word for a reason, than the traditional approach because
Yeah.
sometimes people come in there, they get cookie cutter programs, they get put on
Yep.
these diet programs that are really difficult to follow, and they get charged $10,000 and they get the same program somebody else did for $10,000 and they leave with 30 supplements in a bag.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to tell you is that you're likely going to struggle with that because you're already stuck full of too much stuff.
Yeah. You're forcing more into a system that's already stagnated and can't handle anything else, additionally, even if it's good, right?
It's about capacity. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about good because when you understand that if you eat a yoo-hoo and a ding dong, I'd prefer you not, that's going to be metabolic waste. Okay?
Yes.
But if I give you the best, perfect organic meal, a nice piece of steak, vegetables, and I would say that's the most perfect meal you're ever going to eat. Guess where it goes? Same dump. Same dump. And what I'm going to contend to you is even if you did eat the good stuff, what if it can't get to its target because you're too full of muck, what I
Yeah.
call muck?
Yep.
Then the good stuff can't get where it needs to go either. And I always put the analogy of the fish tank, right? Of the body aquarium, of how your body is just like a fish tank with fish in it, and but you have cells, trillions of them, and no matter what kind of fish you have in the tank, they're all pooping. No matter, and that's the same thing with your cells. And no matter what you put in the tank for the fish food, that also becomes waste. So I need you to think about that for your body as well. And I knew I was on the right track, brother, because I was that person we just talked about who was trying all these nutrition programs and supplements, but I couldn't get better. And then when I started this, holy cow, I got the order right. Imagine that. And then the body could do what it's designed to do, which is to heal itself. It doesn't forget how to do that. It just needs the necessary ingredients to do so. So if you can help get out of your own way by removing the garbage. And then I said, well, maybe I'm a one off, you know? So then I went back and I started to do the same game plan to the people that started to find me once they heard about my story. And I did the same thing for them. And what do you think happened? Holy cow, they started to get a little bit better too. And the reason being is it's just based on physiology and biology and physics. So it always works. It just depends on to what extent that it works. And that's when I realized that what you choose to do is really, really important. But the order that you choose to do things in is even more important than that. That's the
And
difference between drainage precedes supply and supply precedes drainage. They're the two same things, but if you flip those around, you get a different result.
oh, absolutely. And isn't this part of the reason why people that deal with chronic disease, especially in the infectious nature, whether it's Lyme disease, EBV, these things that become chronic and are very difficult to remove,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they're just difficult to remove and antibiotics just make more of a mess of it because you're creating more waste based off
Mm-hmm.
of that. Antibiotics are, anti-life really and just cause a lot of death and decay and more toxicity within the body. And if you can't remove that, where does that go? Isn't that a big portion of why so many patients with infectious diseases just year after year after year after trying to go after the microbe, the pathogen, do not succeed?
Yeah, well, once you're back to the same environment, I mean, the
Right.
pathogens live in the same environment that your cells do. And, because you've got quote unquote good bacteria, bad
Yep.
bacteria inside your body. You're mostly bacteria anyway, right? And you have a lot of viruses in there. You got parasites, you got fungus, but you need those things because if you didn't, you'd be dead like yesterday. I mean,
Yeah.
that's called an ecosystem. But what's the ratio? But what you soon learn is that those bacteria and viruses and parasites and fungus, they love it when you got garbage everywhere. They freaking love it because the rats come out. That's a rat.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
Perfect.
rats,
Hey
they're
man,
cockroaches, they're insects, right? They love that stuff.
I got a great food supply here, man. Let's just stay and munch out. And then what they munch on is you,
Right.
right? And if you want proof of that, go out in nature and look at water that flows.
Yes.
Moving water, first of all, is energized from the movement and in contact with the earth, right? So it gathers that. And then I want you to go to a pool that's sitting in the middle of nowhere that is a cesspool, basically. It's very stagnant. What
Yeah.
do you see over there? A lot of yuck, like
Yeah.
bugs and yuck and filth. And animals are smart enough. Don't drink from there, man. You're going to be dead pretty quick. Go drink from the moving water. So that's what it's like inside of you if your water is stagnant and doesn't move, MOVE, we're back to that. So that's a breeding ground for the bugs. So what if you're trying to kill the bugs and you do kill the bugs from your supplements? Where's the bug waste going?
Right.
It's the same place, man, the same
Yep.
answer, right?
And you're
So
just
first of
creating an
all,
environment that attracts more bugs, right? You're just adding on
well, see,
top of the
that's the
garbage
thing.
pile. So,
Well, this is what a few things got to me here is that one, uh, somebody said once, I can't remember who said it, you cannot get well in the same environment you became ill within. And then I thought, well, what environment? Well, your external environment, where you live,
yep.
the environment of your relationships, that's kind of a big one. The environment of your thoughts sticking around in your head. And then what about the environment that your cells live in? There's a good one to go after,
Hmm.
right? Because what I'm saying is you can improve all those things on the outside, and that's a really good start. But don't forget about the environment on the inside because they always work uh, together. And so it hit me, that's kind of like the terrain theory as opposed to the germ theory,
Yes.
right? And people are still battling about that today because people like to fight about everything. I don't really care which one. I still want you to clean your damn tank. That's all I want you to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Because no matter which one you believe in, it's going to get better from cleaning your tank. So it's a moot point. But that terrain is a big deal for you. And when you get that stuck muck or that poor flow, oxygen significantly decreases. Okay? If not throughout the whole body, it can in regions and parts. Why? Because some places have better blood flow than others.
Yeah.
And then when you don't give oxygen to tissues, they can't heal. They can't recover because they're not getting nutrients, and pain is going to show up somewhere. And bugs love it when there's low oxygen.
Hmm.
That's like party at the beach, man.
Yeah.
Okay. And what many people forget is this. And when you hear it, you're like, well, duh. Yeah, but we forget it. When people have an injury or they have a trauma or they all of a sudden have an autoimmune disease. Yesterday you were okay and today you're not. What's up with that? That's something that happens over decades. That doesn't pop you overnight. How well you recover from whatever that is you're going through depends on the state of your body systems before you got injured. So what I'm going to contend is this. If I had a poorly functioning lymphatic system but didn't know it, and then I get an injury and I can't get better, maybe, just maybe, it's because now that stuck lymphatic system is the block for you recovering from that when somebody else got the same injury you did and they're better. What's the deal? with that. Why?
Yeah,
So I'm not saying that if you clean up your fish tank and you do the lymphatics that, it's going to be unicorns and rainbows and pain magic that goes away and stuff heals. Okay. Sometimes it does. But what I will contend with you, and I'll stand by it until I'm dead, if you have a dirty fish tank, you're always going to struggle.
absolutely.
Your chances of getting better with a clean fish tank and putting new fish in a clean tank with filters that work, they're probably going to live longer than if you put new fish into a tank that's still crappy. They're going to die just like the other ones. And that's kind of what the disease process is, right? We have to be able to make new cells that work well, that have resiliency, longevity, because they die all the time. Because one, they're supposed to,
Yep.
so you can make new ones, and they die from trauma. So your ability to make a new cell that works depends on what I just told you. Nutrients in, waste out. Because if they don't get that flow, they can't. Even though they really, really want to. Trust me, they want to. They're programmed to do the best they can with what they've got in the moment it's in, and your body doesn't want you to be sick any more than you do. It doesn't want to be in pain any more than you do, but it's the only thing it's got to work with.
Well, it's
And I
interesting how
know that's it,
yeah,
right?
I mean, and you go back to that terrain versus germ theory, like in medicine, it's really interesting that debate still rages on when there's so many examples, even within medicine, that you have to clean a wound, provide oxygen to it, all these things if you cut, not because of a germ theory, because that's the environment. If you let it fester and everything, that's where the germs will come into play. So I don't think you don't have to say it's either or, but like you said, like have it clean fish tank and it won't matter as much. Germs are always there. We're not saying that is not the case, but it's just such an interesting debate that rages on since Béchamp and Pasteur. And it's like 100 years later, we're still doing this thing, but we're sicker than ever because I think we've gone too far to one area and said, who cares about the terrain?
Yeah, to me, they're just words and it's all
Yeah,
semantics. And then people love to just debate about anything because they love to debate, but it still doesn't change how physiology and physics work. Like
absolutely.
if you break the laws of physics, this stuff ain't gonna work. If Elon Musk tells you that all the time, right?
Right.
And that's all this stuff is. And so even if it's a germ theory, well, if you have a crappy tank, you're gonna have a lot of germs,
Yes.
right? And then that's the terrain theory of what it's living in. And then it's that age old question of why, if you're in a room full of 20 people and a person
Mm.
sneezes and six get sick and the others don't, what's up with that? Well, there, I just gave you the answer.
Yeah.
It's the state of your systems before you got exposed to something or injured that determines how well you're going to recover from whatever that was, because y'all got exposed to the same quote unquote insert here, whatever it is, but the outcome is different. And that's
Yeah.
when you learn that, well, that's all the body systems, right? And that's where your prior history and your stories and whether you're the one who has been following a semi-decent nutrition plan or whether you exercise a lot or do any breathing patterns a lot. But then I have some people who say, well, I do all that stuff and then I still can't move, but I have somebody who does all this crazy stuff over here. They drink and they party and they don't have anything. And I'm like, well, the operative word is yet. It doesn't mean that the hammer's not going to fall on them. Okay? But then I'm also going to go back to that person who's doing all those things and I'm going to ask a simple question. Have you done anything directly for your lymphatic system? Yes or no? And most often the answer is no.
Right.
And I just want them to start to add that into the mix and then see what kind of changes they have in all of the other things. Right.
And
That's a
is it
really big thing to understand there is that when you work with the lymphatic system and you have the cellular environment, that's the system that determines how well all the other systems can function.
Isn't this part of the conversation on long haulers as well? We're seeing this more and more. I mean, if you were practicing medicine for a long time before even COVID came around, you'd understand a lot of infectious diseases become long haul. Again, EBV comes to mind. Patients know this. They have EBV and it just continues on and on. You can almost
Yeah.
eradicate it. You get a long haul response. You get almost an autoimmune response after time to it. And there's tons of different viral infections, bacterial infections that you could go into long haul. It's just only recently become a much bigger subject matter. But isn't that in part due to poor lymphatic drainage?
I would say yes, because you're back to the same model that we were discussing before. What's your overall terrain like, and what was
Yeah.
it like before you got whatever it is? Because we make the mistake of thinking at least in the Western world, but I think it happens everywhere, that we assume just because somebody looks healthy on the outside and they look really great and, they got a six pack and they do exercise every day, that obviously they're healthy on the inside. There's no correlation to that whatsoever.
Yeah.
None. That's the person who looks great and they're running and they drop dead of a heart attack. You don't
Mhm.
know what's going on underneath that. I have people that come to see me who, I mean, I'm like, gee, what could be wrong with you? Right. But they're a seething mess of inflammation when I check the body by hand. And I see it in elite athletes a lot because they always break themselves down from training,
Yeah.
and they have a high tolerance and capacity to adapt to stress, even though they're breaking down, so they can hide it well. But it's just a matter of when it breaks or when the performance takes a hit. And there's things that you're not going to be able to find in regards to inflammation on any blood test or any MRI or CT scan. Some of that stuff, and a lot of those things show up of how many, does this sound familiar to some people? We can't find anything.
Mhm.
Everything looks okay in your blood work. Well, can you answer me why I can't get out of bed? Can you answer me why I still have pain? Nope. Or they'll just say, the insidious onset, right? Which means I have no idea why you got what you got. Or idiopathic means, I don't know. Okay. Then the first thing I'm going for is fish tank, like lymph, because you'll find it through touch. Because I know this, if I touch a part of the body and somebody has pain, there's inflammation somewhere.
Right.
And I'll just watch and feel their reaction. What does the area feel like to the touch? That I've had people that, they'll get a MRI on something, they don't find anything, and then I go around the area and I touch it and they jump. That's inflammation. And if somebody has inflammation, what do I already know? They have a fluid flow issue,
Mhm.
because that's what inflammation is. And you're supposed to have inflammation. You really need it, because otherwise you would die like quick. You just don't want rampant inflammation that just never shuts off. There's no on off or dimmer switch. It's just full blast, kill everything. That's kind of fight or flight survival mode. Same thing with stress. People think stress is bad. No, I mean, you need stress to become strong and resilient so you can adapt to more stress and be a monster, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm just going to look at the pathways of what might cause inflammation. And here's what I realized. Well, you know what? If I can't get blood flow to something that's trying to heal itself, or if I can't get blood flow away from something, that's even bigger in my world. They can't get away from the inflammation.
Mhm.
It gets trapped, it gets stuck, and then you stay in this pro-inflammatory state because it can't get out, right? Because when you injure something, the immune system comes in through the blood to try to kill that stuff.
Right.
That's what it does. But when it kills it, guess what it makes? Waste, and it's got to get out. And I'm going to say, how does it get out? You should say veins and lymph once again,
Yeah.
right? But What if you got, let's say somebody picked up the garbage in front of your house, but the exit from your street is blocked? You're still gonna keep, you can't get rid of the garbage. You have to clear the whole pathway for it to go. So remember when I said that the lymphatic, the system like circulates, so the blood, I think, makes its way around your whole body within 30 to 45 seconds, somewhere in that ballpark. Supposed to is the operative word, to circulate through. But if there's blockages and it can't get through, well, then you slow down your supply chain and your waste management chain. And then that's when I realized, what do people do when they get hurt? Oh, they treat the site of pain, which is good. This is good. So let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Hurt your right knee, right? And you want to treat the knee. So the body's going to put swelling and inflammation there to try to kill it and prevent it from spreading, because it's got to kill it. But then we go in and we treat the knee and we do everything in there to try to what? Reduce inflammation and increase what? Circulation. Right? That's the fluid flow. But then I'm going to ask people, how does it get to and from the knee? Where does that come from? That's always higher up. From the heart. That's where it comes from. And then it goes from the heart, and I say, how does it get to your knee? Through your fluid pipes. So what many people might not know is that they've probably been compromised in the fluid flow pipes for tightness in the hips, tightness behind the knee, tightness at the neck, the collarbone, all those areas where they may have had prior injuries, and they don't have good flow there. And if you don't have good flow there, the knee is really going to struggle. Really going to struggle.
Yeah.
So that's why you can't just treat one area of the body, because all these parts talk to each other. It's just it's one piece, and it's one, this is really important for people. It's one flow pipe.
Mm.
It has different names, but that doesn't mean they don't talk to each other. They're different sizes, but they still talk to each other. And just because it's a different fluid system doesn't mean it still doesn't communicate with the other fluid system. So what do I mean by that? That all these fluids flow into each other and out of each other. They just change names when they get to a new place in your body. So lymph eventually travels into the veins at the neck, and then the veins, and then it changes names. And then it goes from the veins into the heart, and guess where it goes again? Out into the artery. So everybody thinks it's a different fluid. No, it's not. And even the fluid that surrounds your brain and your spinal cord and your nerves, the cerebrospinal fluid. I always ask people, where do you think that comes from? Your vascular system, the blood system. It's the choroid plexus up here. So they still go into each other. And then the cerebrospinal fluid flows into the lymph fluid, and it comes back around. So that's one of the reasons people who have long hauler COVID type issues are suffering, because all that stuff is stuck in many different places. But one of the biggest places it gets stuck is the head, neck, face, and brain. It gets stuck there.
Isn't this precisely why, something like a root canal could be so detrimental? You don't have flow anymore.
Right, exactly. Because if fluids don't move, you don't heal, period.
Yeah.
And I'll stand by that, because it's physiologically not possible. And if they do flow, how is your flow? Is it slow? Is it stagnated? And if you're on this earth, it probably is, because of the sheer amount of overload from toxins that are coming into the body. No matter what you do, that they still come in. It's just impossible to prevent them from coming in. But then you also have the toxins that are still in there, added on the ones that you're already bringing in, and then the capacity breaks. So if I can begin to improve your flow routes, then all the stuff that I mentioned before should work better. How can it not? Right?
Absolutely.
It's almost
And
so simple. So people tell me that, Doc, come on, Doc, it can it really be that simple? And I'm like, yeah, it can, because effective things don't have to be complicated, but everything in the body is based on like processes and interactions. In order for something to happen at step 15, you need some stuff to happen with 1 through 14. And that's the way the body works. And if you miss something here, then the body has to say to us, oh boy, we're missing this one. What can we do to problem solve and try to make up for that not being here? Then it just pulls from anywhere that it needs to keep going. That's its job. It's called compensations and
yeah.
adaptations and resilience. And your body does that all day long until it runs out of options. And when it runs out of options, it tells you, I can't do this anymore without your help. I've tried. And the only way that it gets your attention most often is I'm going to hurt you.
Hmm.
I'm going to send you some pain, because the pain is going to knock and tell you, hey, change something up. Like, you might not know what it is, but it's telling you stop or shift. And humans, like we do, I'll worry about you later. And then the body says, okay, I'll keep going. I'll do what I have to do. That's my job. And then it says, all right, I'm coming back. I'm going to scream loud. I'm going to hit you harder. And that's what it does. And eventually it won't go away, because it's going to be like the pebble in the shoe. You're going to have to stop walking and figure it out of what's going on. Right. So all of these symptoms that you're getting are communication signals.
Yeah.
And
Warning.
what I read once in a physiology book, I can't remember who said it. I wish I could. But it said that most of the symptoms that you experience are a healthy reaction to an unhealthy environment.
Hmm.
Like, just let that sink into your database for a second. And then what have we been talking about all day long? Cellular environment. If you clean up that environment, maybe your body can finally say, hey, guess what, everybody? We don't have to turn all this stuff on anymore, because Perry finally figured it out. Waste out, nutrients in. Boom. Let's go to work. And that's what happened to me, where it's 10 years later, and I'm honestly at a better state mentally and physically 20 years ago, because I was not feeling that great before I hit rock bottom. Now that I look back on it, and those subtle signs and hints were there. But guess what Perry paid attention to? Supply, supply,
Mm.
supply, nutrition, exercise, working out, breathing, supplements. That's good. That's good. It got me another 10 years until too much garbage. Then, bam, I started reverse aging, going backwards the way you're supposed to feel. So simple, but really, really powerful.
And that's the thing. When we really look at health and how intelligent the body is, it's kind of those simple foundations really are at our core what keeps us our healthiest. If we overlook them, we will go into a disease state. But we have this amazing lymphatic system that does so much. One of the things you touched on there was the kind of mental aspect, the game of the brain in a sense, and how
Oh,
that
that's
works.
big.
That's huge, especially this day and age where everything's an information age. Your brain's just running, 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 and you need more out of it. You need more focus, more concentration, more memory power. We want to up level everything, and our reliance on computers now is so high. But The brain has its own system. You talk about it as the glymphatic system. Could you go into, you know,
Yeah.
the glymphatic? Because again, it's most people are saying what is that word as opposed to lymphatic system?
Yeah. Great question. So I'm so glad you brought this topic up. So let's break out the word glymphatic. What's the operative part of that word at the end? Lymphatic, right? What you need to know for this is that it's gonna dump into your regular lymphatics.
Mm.
Because what did I say before? Different name, dumps into the same place. So it's lymphatics is for the glial cells in your brain because they have their own kind of immune cells, waste management cells up in there. They're called microglia. They're like little Pac-Man, that eat stuff out. And then they got to get rid of your neuron waste, your neuron poop, right?
Mm.
But that's going to drain into the deep cervical lymph nodes in your neck that are part of your peripheral lymphatic system. Okay. So central, peripheral, I mean, they still talk to each other, right? So if you clear the lymphatics down below, the brain waste will get out more efficiently. Okay. And so the key to brain health is not just going after the brain, it's the whole body because your brain doesn't know what the hell a brain is or what a peripheral limb is. It's just, I'm me, right? You can call me a body, mind, whatever. It's just how I go. The fluids are still going to work that way. And here's the one thing I started to think about. You know, whenever you use your brain, you fire neurons, you wire and fire. And the brain is probably the most metabolically active structure in your body. So if something's highly metabolic, what does it make a lot of? Waste, right? And then I say, well, the brain needs a lot of oxygen and it needs a lot of glucose. And then I ask you, how does that get to the brain? Then you should say blood flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it gets in there, and then all that neuron poop is happening, and then it's got to get out. And then I'm going to say, how does it get out? Then you say blood flow and lymph flow. Yes. So it goes down veins and it goes down the lymphatics to the same place everything else is going, right? The waste from your knee is going to the same place as the waste from your brain. But if the drain is clogged, I don't care where they're coming from. You still have to open up the clog in the brain. So if you have stuck muck in the brain and you have poor blood flow in the brain, then you're going to get inflammation. And here's the thing, man. Brains don't work well if you can't get oxygen and blood flow and waste out. And then it becomes hard to try to improve your life or change your life or make a new habit because it takes a lot of energy to make a new habit. And then people are just like, I'm so tired. I don't want to do anything. Even though I know I should, I just don't have the energy, right? Because you don't have the environment that's conducive towards a brain to function well and be able to make a difference in how much pain you feel. Because pain comes from the brain itself. So a healthy brain can dampen pain better than an unhealthy brain. And all brain health is correlated to lymphatic health, period. You can't separate the two. And then when you learn, wait a minute, let me think logically about where most of this lymph plumbing sits. Most of it's in the neck. Like a lot of your lymph toilets or the garbage men are in the neck. And then I thought to myself, okay, that's an interesting stat, but why in the hell would the body do that? Oh, the brain's up there. Got to clear the brain, right? And then 50% of your lymph is located in your gut. And then I'm thinking, well, that's kind of interesting. Why would it put it there too? See, body's not stupid. That's because you learn that most of your immune system is in your gut. So it makes sense to put the biggest player for your immune system right where it needs it most. And then I think, where's the one place that you put a lot of toxins inside your body all day long? Through your mouth hole. And where does it go? Into the gut. And then if you have a gut issue, which if you're alive on this earth, the answer is yes, you do. Then the lymph is going to be there to try to help you out. So what happens if the lymph gets stuck in the gut and the lymph gets stuck in the neck? Where's all the muck stay? In your gut and in your brain. And then you wonder why everybody has all these inflammation issues and they're not able to get better. And I'm just going to tell you, fluid routes. That's what I'm going to tell you. If you can open up the fluid routes in conjunction with your nutrition, in conjunction with your supplements, you're going to notice a difference, right? So many people can't change their behavior even when they want to, because their lymph system is so backed up, the fluid flow systems are so backed up that the brain couldn't change no matter how much you wanted to.
It's such an interesting take, as so many patients or people just, dealing with general fatigue or unhealthy habits can't find the vitality, the energy to change them. They may have the want, they may have that understanding and awareness that they should change, but continuously hit that wall of change. And part of that may be because their lymphatic system are stagnating and they don't even know it. They're saying, I have no willpower, I have no, energy to do this, I can't change. They can. They're just stuck in a, heavily toxic environment that won't allow them to change.
Yes, and I came across that by studying neurology.
Hmm.
And I learned from that you learn that it's a metabolic cost to everything. So Lisa Feldman Barrett, who wrote some great books, she says, there's like a bank account. The body's always trying to determine how much energy it's going to take, how much can I give, and it has to decide where it's going to send the energy at all given times. Do I need to send it here? Can I send it here? So it's always happening in the background. You just don't know it because you're looking at TikTok, right? You're doing whatever. So there's always a metabolic cost. And what you learn is that's why you have habits, because habits have a low metabolic cost, because that's repeat, don't think.
Yes.
I don't think about it anymore. I just do it. So that's why when you have a habit, it's really hard to break, because it takes a lot of mental energy and dedication and focus to make a new habit. Like 30 days, they tell you something like that, right? So then my next question is, what if you don't have a lot of energy to go around? Then your brain makes a decision. Well, I can't change even though you want to, because I don't have enough energy to barely get you out of the damn bed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep you repeating the same patterns of survival. You will repeat compensation, adaptation, and survival patterns all the time just to keep you alive. And your body repeats old patterns, one, because it's easier to do, but two, they've worked. How do you know they worked? Well, you're not dead. So they worked. They may not be the most optimal ones now, but they can rely on it. So when you want to try to make a new habit, it can't. And what happens is this, man. When you start to clean the lymph and you clean the blood and you get better blood flow, then the neurons can now wire and fire and connect. First of all, because I don't have crappy brain fluid that it's living in, dirty cerebrospinal fluid. If you got dirty blood, you got dirty cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. And then now everything can start to communicate and talk with each other. And then you say to yourself, you know what? I actually feel a little bit better today. I feel a little more energy today. And then, wow, I can do one more rep. And so your ability to change increases. So I honestly believe that people are so hard on themselves because they think they're mentally weak. No, it's the environment that your brain is in to where it can't give you that powerhouse, resilient human being that everyone is supposed to be. You're not supposed to be tired and fatigued and lethargic and sick and headaches and feeling crappy all the time and depressed. It's not normal. It is now, but that's
Right.
not the way humans are designed to live. And I get really emotional with this stuff because for years I couldn't get off my couch
Mhm.
to go out on that driveway to play basketball with my children when they wanted to play with their dad because I could barely get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, but I just couldn't. And when I found the lymphatics, and then when I started to connect the lymph stuff to everything that I'm telling you now, like when you pull a string, you realize it's connected to everything else. So this was what I was looking for to make sense to what I've learned in neurology and pain science and movement and psychology and all these things that they're interrelated with each other, and then everything fell into place. And I see it happen all the time. People just get that spark back. When I taught the big six on your last episode, it's the six places that we have people release the lymphatics and increase blood flow throughout the body. Every single day, I get a message from people who saying, I have been doing that program for like a few weeks, a few months, or a few days, and I feel better. I have more energy. I'm less tired. It's just so wonderful. And the reason is it's because it helps everything that we've been talking about for the last hour. When you do it, it just seems almost at this point ridiculously stupid simple. When you do the big six, people laugh at it when they first see it because it is that simple. But once you understand the physiology and the neurology and the physics behind it, then you go, whoa, what now I actually get it, doc. Okay. It's not silly at all. And the six done on a daily basis can keep you that hashtag beast mode resilient monster that you're supposed to be.
Yeah. For those that don't know the Big Sick, can you quickly just recap that? I know we went into that last time, but there may be new listeners right now. Can you go into that as well as some of the other points? Because we've obviously established, and I think it was great to hear
Yeah.
that because, vitality is everything. It's not just for the super sick. It's not, it's the people that are just like, hey, I just want to be better, but I can't find the energy. Well, this may be it and probably is part of this reason for sure. So how do we then improve lymphatic drainage and everything? People like, okay, I get it. What do I do?
Great question. And that's actually one of the reasons why I made the big six so simple is because people didn't have a lot of energy to do pretty much anything else.
Right.
I just had to get you started, man. Just
Yeah.
just start. And then when you start to feel better, you're like, bam, I'm all in, right? Uh, so the six places that I teach you are based on where the biggest lymph node clusters gather that are basically your body's toilet system to flush out the waste. And that's where all the garbage men are to unburden your waste. And they're strategically placed around the body and the joints of the body that are supposed to have the most movement when you move. So the operative word is supposed to, and the other word is when you move. Okay. So that's why I want you to move. And people say, move how? And my answer is yes, just move. So those clusters around movement, because every time you move, it pumps them through muscular contraction. And then when you move, guess what increases? Your breathing. So then your pump increases. So what I tell people is close your mouth, breathe in and out through your nose whenever you can. When you're exercising, when you're sleeping, when you're doing whatever, if you can. Okay. And you're going to go to the six parts, and I'll give you some bonus ones today that you can add to the six. All right. The first place that we go to all the time is the main drain of fluids in the body for the vein and the lymph, which are your waste management ones. The collarbone is always number one, above and below. I would like for you to spend a, a larger amount of time in a perfect world just chilling out at number one, massaging it in many different ways with many different pressures and different speeds. Just don't cause pain. Okay. That's the number one rule. Don't cause pain. Because when I open up the main drain, all the other ones will now be able to start flowing to it automatically. Okay. So you clear number one, and then we go straight up to number two, which is just below the brain, behind the angle of the jaw, below the lobe of the ear at the upper cervical. They call it atlas and axis C1, C2. The largest lymph node toilet in the neck sits right there, and you just massage there. Okay. Same thing. Many different directions. I like circles a ton. I like circles a ton. Then you go to number three. Number three is at the shoulder joint, right where your pectoral muscle attaches to the shoulder. Just massage and rub in there. That's another great reason why just putting your hands over your head and hanging really opens that up. Like hanging is a wonderful way to help your body heal itself.
Mm.
So you do both sides. Then number four is where most of the lymph sits, the entire abdomen, from the belly button up to the bottom of the sternum, the whole thing. I'd like for you to spend a lot of time there too, because that's where 50% of your lymph lives. Use both hands, rub up and down, side to side, draw hieroglyphics, like go deeper. And I learned this from studying Qigong and Eastern medicine. They do belly taps and slaps, like 50 light taps on your belly, moves the muck. It gets some of the blood flow going, and it's a really great stimulator for your vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But the point is now four is going to be able to rush up to number one because you already opened number one. And then number five is the crease of the groin called your inguinal lymph nodes. Those get congested a lot because people sit a ton. Right? Big trap point. So rub across the crease of the groin in different directions, same way. And you can lightly slap and tap that area too. That works quite well. And then number six would be the lymph nodes behind the knee called the popliteal lymph nodes. That's one of my favorite spots because that's a huge place where blood flow gets congested because of sitting a ton. Tight calves, and you trap off the drainage from the calf, foot, and ankle. So that's why people get a lot of swelling in the ankles or varicose veins and spider veins. That's a pressure problem when you have that. But it's also in acupuncture, they call that it's a great spot for low back pain. When you go behind the knee, I think it's urinary bladder 40, UB40. I could be wrong. Kind of sounds like a reggae group, right? But that's because the sciatic nerve that goes down your leg splits off just above the knee, and it gets a stick point right there. So if you're puffy behind the knee, you really cause blood flow chaos to your sciatic nerve right there, and that's going to hurt. Okay. So you rub right there, and that's versus a doc. It's the craziest thing in the world, but my back actually feels better. Does that make sense? Yep. Sure does. All right. So that's the six. And then what you would do after that is just move the body. So I always have people kind of lightly jump up and down a little bit, like little slight rebounders on your calves. And your calves are great because they're built-in dynamic rebounders. And when they contract, they pump the vein flow back up to the collarbone. And now that you opened up all those routes, the pump can send it up to the collarbone, right? Because it's not just about lymph stagnation, it's vein stagnation. You always have both. And what I thought was quite fascinating when I started to study circulation is that you have twice as many veins as you do arteries. And I thought about that. Like, why would that be? Because they're reservoirs. That means you put water somewhere until it can get out. It takes overflow. So when you have stagnation in the body and stuff can't get out, it stays in the body, but then it stays in the veins.
Mm,
And then that's when you get vein distension and varicose veins and stuff like that. But your waste management drains now get stuck as well. Okay. That's why you have twice as many. So it's, to me, what does that mean? It's twice as important. So your body already told you what's the more important side, the artery side or the vein side. I just told you, the vein side. And the veins go to the collarbone. The veins go to your collarbone. So if you have that, that's 6. You can do 7, which is in the middle of 3. That's the entire sternum, along the sternum. The sternum is supposed to be hard, breast chest plate, like a wall. Many people have it to where it's puffy, tender, and swollen, and absolutely agonizing when you touch it. That is not normal. If you have a puffy, tender sternum, that means you've had a deep lymphatic block for probably a decade or more that's stuck. And it's going to be stuck right behind your sternum along your spine, right at the duct that's trying to go to your collarbone. That's a deep one. You have to clear that. That's a must. So you rub the sternum, and just by rubbing the sternum and doing the big 6, you'll start to open it up. Then I want you to find the spaces between the ribs next to the sternum and put your fingers in between the spaces on both sides and rub right there. You're welcome, and you're going to hate it because it's going to hurt. And here's my point. It's not supposed to hurt when it's normal. It hurts when it's backed up and stagnated and you got poor flow. And then those nerves, when they get irritated, they'll cause pain pretty much anywhere in your body. Anywhere. Need to open that up, and you'll be able to take a much deeper breath now because you opened up the ability for those nerves to now stretch. Because they've got compromised blood flow at the end of the nerve. Okay. And then another place you can go is the tailbone, your sacrum. Right? You go to the base of the spine and you rub the tailbone, or you put I like to use vibration massage balls, little balls that vibrate. That's why we made our own vibration balls. You can put the vibration ball on the 6 places. You can even put it on the sternum and on the tailbone. The reason I go to the tailbone is because when you get stuck full of lymph in the abdomen, it backflows to the tailbone. And the tailbone, neurological wise, that's part of your parasympathetic nervous system, so you can relax and recover. So if you have inflammation and stuck muck around there, it can compromise the function of your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system balance like that. And a third bonus is you'll likely have a bowel movement and you'll poop when you stimulate the sacrum, because that supplies the left half descending part of your colon, the poop chute. So you can let stuff out. And that's good because you don't want to have constipation, because that means you get stuck full of what? Waste.
Yeah.
Right? And then that backs up. So there's a lot of lymphatics going on in there, but there's a lot of neurology going on in there and a lot of vascular differences. I'll tell you this, man. If you can do those 8 places on a daily basis, and then try to breathe in and out through your mouth your nose more than your mouth. And if you can do that for a month, you're going to shift your healing needle. It's impossible not to.
Do you ever recommend using lymphatic creams while doing that? different types of
Lymphatic
ones,
what?
or lymphatic creams, or
Oh,
even
sure.
some people
Yeah.
use oils, whether it's castor can help, or I've seen other
Yeah.
lymphatic ones from Europe that are kind of, made to accelerate a little bit, stimulate.
Yeah. Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. You can do those for several reasons. One, you can get a nicer glide around the
Yeah.
skin. So sometimes it's more comfortable for somebody. A
Hmm.
lot of times I don't like the creams because I have a little bit more uh, tension and pull from the
Mm.
skin. So it actually moves the lymph more because it's pulling with my hand. If I was, so it was more, the friction was the word I was looking for in that region. But the most important thing beyond the cream is to make sure that you do the correct order.
Yes.
That's a non-negotiable. So it has to
Yeah.
be 1 through 6, not 6 through 1, because that's based on the dynamics and the physics of how fluids move. That's one of the reasons why I don't arbitrarily just start massaging body parts that have tightness or if they have inflammation or tension, because yeah, I mean, you're always going to move blood flow, but my next question is, where are you moving it to?
Right.
And how's the blood flow get to where you're rubbing? If you can't answer that question, I don't want you rubbing anything, because you
Hmm.
have to open up those routes. And when you do the 6, you already did that. Like, you just start there,
Yeah.
then you can go back and isolate other regions. So when I teach my lymphatic work, I always say you do the 1 through 6, then afterwards you can go back and focus on your hands and your arms and your legs and your back, and you can massage or dry brush then. So you always go from the collarbone out, and then we go from outside in, specifically for that reason.
Hmm.
But also, I don't care what kind of cream you use. If you do it in the wrong order, it's not going to work
That's
as
right.
well.
Steps and priorities
That's
are
the
very
only
important.
non-negotiable. Yeah, say it again.
Steps and priorities are very important. And it's not just with lymphatic drainage. I find that so much with just, if you're trying to push heavy metals by doing a bunch of chelation without open up the organs of elimination, you'll probably
Right.
do more damage. Right. So it's, again, there
Yes.
are steps to this.
Yeah, it's just that's the processes that the body has to have. It's
Yeah.
steps. That's where not yeah, you can understand anatomy, but it's not so much about anatomy. It's about physiology.
Mm,
That's why I study that, because anatomy are the parts. Physiology are how the parts interact with each other. That's the most important part that you need to understand. And when you know both, I mean, you're a really great clinician and a good critical thinker on being able to map things out. But I read once, I was studying neurology, and it was something called the dynamical systems theory. And because I started to study like complex systems as well, systems theory, because the body is full of complex systems that have to work with each other. They're not complicated, but they're complex. Humans make it complicated. And it said this is that what happens somewhere depends on what you did before what you just did, basically. So what that means is this is that if I'll give you an example because it's pretty cool. I'm going to pick 2 spots. I'm going to say your right shoulder, and then I'll say my left hip. Right shoulder, left hip. 2 separate places, right? But they're not really separate. So if I touch the right shoulder, I've influenced what? Blood flow, fascia, but I've also influenced the human nervous system from the touch. Because now your brain acknowledges input to A, correct? And then, of course, whatever that stimulus is, did I punch you or did I rub you? You got it?
mhm.
So here comes A. What you need to know is this: no matter where you touch second is completely dependent on what your nervous system did with the first spot, like A. So what happens with B is no longer about B, because
Right.
then I would go to B at your hip, but that is completely dependent on what A did, right?
Yes.
Now, these are the same 2 spots, yes? Now let's reverse the order. What happens if I go down and I touch spot B first? Completely different outcome.
Mm.
Why? Because I'm influencing blood changes from this spot, lymph changes from this spot, which changes pressure everywhere in the body, but I'm also having a change into the nervous system of the person that I just touched by going after the left hip, which now changes completely what happens at A. So even though they're the same spots, they're not the same spots at all when you look at neurology, because neurology is input goes into the brain. The brain has to tell itself a story or a narrative about the input.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get the output. So that makes a huge difference. What happens if a person had a surgery or an injury to the left hip that I didn't know about? What happened if that person had some sexual abuse in their past and I go near the left hip B first? You can bet your bottom dollar that happens up here at A. It's going to have a big shift to that. So one, I want you to know that from a neurological perspective. But the biggest thing I want you to take away from my work is that you completely shift how fluids move in the whole body from where you touch first based on flow rates and pressure rates. And even the nervous system. Why? Because the nervous system is ultimately going to control circulation. Because if I put you into sympathetic nervous system driving, sympathetic nervous system input constricts vascular flow, chokes it off, which it's supposed to, but it's not supposed to stay there, right? So if I touch you in a place and it freaks you out, the whole system goes on lockdown. And that influences what happens next. But here's what we learned from the moral of the story. The nervous system is also impacted by what? How the lymph system and the vascular system has flowed for years as well, because your sympathetic nervous system is only going to work as well as the blood flow that gets it. Does that make sense? So when people say, which came first, did the lymph or the blood or the sympathetics? Yes, they did. I don't care, because what am I going to do? I'm going to do the big six regardless.
Right.
But the reason I went through that long explanation is because that's the biggest thing that's shifted in my 30 years of practice, is not necessarily what I do, because there's a billion and one things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to be dependent on where you choose to do it and what order you choose to do it in. And when you realize that, you understand a lot about how the body works. The reason it's not easy to do that is because you have to think a lot and you got to figure it out. And that's called critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why when people say, Doc, I mean, what do you teach people, man? It's this. No, I teach them how to think. That's what I teach. That's my thinking process. Because when I was lying and meditating once, I was thinking to myself, that's ultimately what had to happen with me first too. I had to shift how I was thinking in order to solve my problem. And that's what I'm trying to teach people here. I'm just trying to do most of the work for you, because now all of my 30 years of being in the quicksand, hopefully you won't have to go through it, and you can just jump into doing the big six and then see how you feel, but understanding why you're doing it.
Right. And figuring that out and building that awareness in a much shorter time frame than it took you. Right.
Well, that's kind of the definition of success, right? Learn from people that have been where you are already. So hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes and you can get from point A to point B a lot faster. That's what I'm trying to do for other people. Yeah. And here's the thing. I know it's going to make a difference for people when they begin to do it. I don't know how much, but I know it will shift your needle. Maybe it's just enough of a shift that you needed to grab onto that ledge so you don't feel like you want to let go anymore. And then you can get a foothold or a toe hold and then pull yourself up to the next one.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you're finally up at the top. But when you've struggled to get to the top, you realize that that's the time that you need to turn around, look over, and lend a hand to everybody else who's still trying to get up.
Absolutely. You
And
mentioned
that's what this stuff is.
vibration. Yeah, you mentioned the vibration ball is something that you absolutely advocate for. What are your thoughts
Love
on
it.
vibration plates in general? That was a big one for a while.
Oh, I love them. I get
Yeah,
that question a lot. Like, what do
yeah,
you think of vibration plates? What do you think of rebounders? I think they're fantastic because they're just ways to get your body moving,
yep.
and they're unique ways of moving, which is pretty cool, which I like it. And sometimes when people are really unable to move a lot or can't walk for distances or something, those are nice options where you
Hmm.
can at least get some things to be able to stimulate vibration and energy through the body. So I usually will tell people I would like for you to do your big six before you do those,
Mm,
because then you'll have a
yeah,
different vibration session. The reason being is that if you jump on a vibration plate, everything's going to be shaken at the same time.
yeah.
So I needed to open up the flow routes of the six, and then I jump on, and then now the garbage trucks can take it to the dump, you know? The only caveat of those is you have to be careful with the vibration plates and the jumping up and down because that is highly stimulatory to the vestibular system and
Mm,
the inner ear.
hmm.
And many people who've had chronic inflammation or autoimmune disease and things like that have some type of compromise in their balance system of the body that they might not realize is there. And because that system is so hardwired for survival, that when you jump up and down and rebound too much, a few things can happen. One, you can overload the lymphatic system too soon
Hmm.
because it can't tolerate a 20-minute vibration session, even though that is said to be good. It's just too much.
Yeah.
The other reason is you're going to overstimulate the vestibular system. One, you can feel pretty crappy. You can feel sick. But two, you'll unknowingly put yourself in a more fight or flight response because you're signaling a survival mechanism from the lack of balance. So what I usually do is I tell people to do a very simple standing balance test that will kind of give you a good idea how quickly you can jump into those. So it's a test that I do on everybody. If I have a moment to tell people, I'll tell
Hmm.
them, take your shoes and your socks off, put your feet together so they touch, and then just stand there like that with your eyes open and notice for yourself or record yourself or have somebody look how balanced do you look, and don't stop breathing. And then from there, if you're doing okay, I want you to close your eyes and then see what your balance is like. Now, if you're alone, I would like for you to be near a wall or something you can hold on to because I don't want you to fall, because this can surprise people of how difficult this actually is
Mm,
because nobody really tries to check their balance a lot.
yeah.
And close your eyes, breathe normal, and see. You should be able to stand there no problem without swaying really far sideways or forward in circles. If you have a lot of sway there, you got to go in slow to
Mm,
rebounding and vibration, like a minute at a clip. That's it.
yeah.
Then, if you do okay with those, then you move to standing on one leg at a time. So feet together, raise one knee up like you're taking a high step, but stand tall, eyes open, breathe, see if you can balance, and then switch legs.
Mm,
You should be able to easily stand with your eyes open, not flopping all over the place for 20 seconds easy.
hmm.
If you go timber, you just have to go slow
Yep.
on your other one. And the last one is where single leg, but with eyes closed. That's the most challenging one. But in reality, you should be able to do eyes closed on one leg for 20 seconds.
Mm,
That's the goal. Most people last 5 seconds,
hmm.
go right over.
Interesting.
So That just means you can't stimulate the system too much because it's a compromised system. And if you overstimulate a system, it can shut itself down again because you just overstimulated it. It's just too much. You have to go slow with anything in relationship to neurology or fluid flow. More isn't better, better is better.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see is everybody, and I see it with lymphatic work, and I learned my lesson with that. I used to not do 6 places. I did about 50. Like, I was all in,
Yeah.
but people didn't do well with that. It was too much. And I said, this is not the way to go. So I dialed it back, and it was more successful because one, they felt better when they did it, but two, they didn't want to keep doing something where they felt like crap, and three, it just took too long. So,
Yeah.
I know human behavior. They may do something for a little bit, but they're not going to stick with it if it takes too long. And you make them feel like crap, they're not changing,
Yeah.
right? So if you mix those in there, but do you understand logically why I want people to take it easy on those? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a big one in general when you're trying to remove toxins from the body. You got to start slow. A lot of people just go right in, do heavy IV. That's not the way to go. You got to know yourself and understand. Just as if you're doing like a spring cleaning, you may want to just start with one room at a time and not try and throw all the garbage from every room, right? And become overwhelmed. Then you just got a big pile of garbage sitting there and you're tired. And then all the pests come for that. You can't even get up the next day because you just went overboard and your house was filled with garbage. So I completely understand that. I'm always of this approach of the right priorities to everything, going slow, easing in. For those that have already maybe eased in or hitting the 6 points, feeling good about it, how do you feel about drainage remedies, gemotherapy, other things you could kind of supplement to hopefully get the movement going a little bit more?
Yeah, I love those. That's a great question. I constantly get messages from people of, Doc, what do you think about this device or, this supplement or what's the best food for the lymphatic system? I kind of get that a lot, right? But I'm a fan of anything that can help the body get rid of the stuff that's stuck inside of it so you can optimize your healing and recovery and regeneration. I those are all I tell people is that there's a difference between principles and techniques.
Mm,
So principles are one, two, three, four, five, six. Principles are you need good blood flow to something and waste away from something. Principles are everything's going to flow to the collarbone whether you want it to or not. Like those are non-negotiables. Techniques are what you choose to accomplish that task,
mm,
which means that I don't care what tool you use or what supplement or whatever. I ultimately know the principle you're trying to follow.
mm,
The technique, there's a billion and one of them. The only time I'm going to have a problem with you is that if you're throwing a technique and you don't understand the principle whatsoever.
mm.
That's when stuff goes sideways. That's when people don't get better. Or the biggest mistake that I see is people throw 300 techniques on somebody with no principle underneath it. And then that's the kitchen sink kind of analogy. I'm just going to throw it at you and because it's supposed to work or it helped this other person, so it must help you. Well, who the hell ever told you that? No. And I'm going to see what sticks. But what you'll learn is when the body is overwhelmed, it's really easy to overwhelm it.
Yes.
And
We're
then
already
when you
overwhelmed.
overwhelm it, it shuts down.
Yeah, we're living in an overwhelming world. Why complicate it anymore? Stick to those principles, those foundations, and build off of that as you start to remove things and make your life less complex in a sense.
You've been in this for a long time as a healthcare provider and helping a lot of people with things like yourself and you do. Or if you're just an everyday person and you've been suffering for a long period of time, you clear yourself out of the muck mess and you finally see the matrix for what it is. And you realize that it always comes down to some essential fundamentals and basics that
Mhm.
have to be met first in order for anything else to actually work at all or work well. And those are fundamental principles, kind of like gravity. If I throw it
Yeah.
up, I know that sucker's going to come down.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that I'm trying to teach people here. If you don't open up your lymph flow, that's like trying to go against gravity. You'll learn your lesson. Okay. The other one is stuff like the boring things that everybody knows and everybody reads at every health book or diet book known to man. And the reason that you see it all the time is because that's known as a basic and a fundamental. You need to hydrate. And if you don't drink enough water, and then the debate determines, well, you need this water, you need that water, what type of water? Just relax, man, chill. It's okay. Just don't stress yourself out. Just try to drink more water and less other stuff to begin. Okay.
Right.
And because most of your body is water, like the lymph is something like 90% water.
Mm.
Your blood is 70%
Mhm.
water. And hang on for this one. The cerebrospinal fluid that goes around in your brain and your spinal cord is 99%
Hmm.
water. So let me ask you a question. How well do you think those systems are going to work if you're chronically dehydrated? They're not, but you're not going to really notice it. Why? Because your body is going to try to compensate for that dehydration day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, until all of a sudden it can't anymore. And that's the one of the answers as to why, when I ask my clients this question, it's why today, why now, why not yesterday or last week? And they usually say, well, I don't know, doc, that's why I'm here. And then I say, but if you did know, then it's usually going to come into, it's a good question. Like, what happened? I already know what happened. Your body lost its ability to compensate and adapt and solve the problems it has. It got overwhelmed. And you have to go back to fundamentals and the basics. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with going out in the sun. It's the same thing through doing some breathing techniques. The same thing through nutrition, which is, stop eating crappy food and eat better food. And you already know what they are. I don't have to tell you. Everybody tell you the same thing. Just start there.
Yeah.
And do your big six, which is an absolute fundamental. If you drink more water, if you go outside, if you do your big six, you try to eat a little bit better, move a little bit more of yourself, choose to spend some time around better people, right? I guarantee you within a month, you're going to say, ow, I'm feeling a little bit different, right? And you'll move that needle in the direction that you have been wanting to go in. And that's why your environment inside the body, but your environment outside of the body is very critical. And that's why I love your show, because people that are trying to get well, sometimes they're around a toxic environment in their life where they feel lost and they don't feel supported, and the people don't get it. And they're like, they need people like you that they can listen to and have what's called a sandbar in the ocean where you don't
Mm.
feel like you're going to drown to get there. And I wanted to end by saying something that really stuck with me from um, my friend Lisa Feldman Barrett, who I mentioned before. It's a great quote, but it resonated. She said, the best thing for a human nervous system is another human nervous system
Mm.
that that can help co-regulate with you. That's connection and community. But here's the second part of that quote. The worst thing for a human nervous system is another human nervous system, which means you need to choose wisely the nervous systems you're hanging out with. Okay. But now here's the cool part. When you do the big six, you automatically got to help your nervous system function better. So now you're going to have a better ability to make that choice. How about
Hmm.
them apples?
And you attract the right nervous systems to you, right? Universal
Yeah.
principles of polarity. Yeah.
And that comes back down to the same thing of what? Energy.
Energy. Everything is
Energy.
energy.
But there you go. And energy always makes what? Waste, right? So
Always makes
it's
waste. And as the Chinese know, stagnation is death, movement is life. And that is precisely what the lymphatic system teaches us.
dude, they've been, they've been talking about lymphatics and Ayurvedic medicine for thousands of years.
Yep.
And they've been talking about stagnation of chi and energy and flow in Eastern medicine forever. And they teach a fundamental principle that illness happens when you get stagnation in your blue blood.
Mm,
And I'm going to say, what the hell is blue blood? It's called veins, is what it's
hmm.
called. And so in my world, from an a Western medicine perspective, your energy is the fluid system. That's the arteries and the veins and the lymph, because that's the only way anything gets anywhere. So if you want to call it chi, you can call it that, but it's the same thing. It's just the routes of energy and flow and blood. So we're all saying the same thing. We're just using different words to do it. But I've always said, when you go back and you look at the ancients who were teaching these things, that's because they knew it's innate, it's fundamental basics, and they didn't make the mistake of overthinking things. And you realize, holy cow, they've been doing this for a couple thousand years. It probably works, right? And then I can prove to you how it works once you understand physics and physiology, because they both help explain each other. Because I thought it was quite fascinating when you look at all these chakra points or energy points or Dantian points. I'm going to say, do you know there's a huge ass nerve cluster and blood flow route below each and every single one of those spots? And they go, no, I had no idea. What? Now you do. Now you know why it works.
Yeah.
Right? So your largest lymph node in your body is going to live right near your freaking solar plexus, man. I mean, bam, that's it.
Yeah. It's incredible how the ancients understood so much more in a sense than what we do, and we can rely on that and live a really healthy life. It's just looking back and understanding who we are and the awareness of these things like the lymphatic system. Know thyself and you can heal thyself. So, Perry, I think that's a wonderful place to end at. Thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Thank you very much, my friend. It was a blast as always. Always love hanging out with you and love your
Always.
energy. Thank you so very much. I'm real easy to find. I've been doing this stuff for quite a while. If you just type in 3 words in any search engine, stop chasing pain, Dr. Perry's going to show up somewhere. I got a lot of stuff out there. You'll be busy for a little bit. You'll see all my social media places and any place you want to learn a little bit more about courses and memberships and all sorts of stuff like that. So, love to see you there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Perry, and thank you for coming back. Thank you for continuing to share your knowledge and your story with others. So go to Stop Chasing Pain. Simple enough. You made it so easy for people to find you, which we are appreciative of. And until next time, continue writing your own healing story.